So the NBA bubble's, I guess you could say, regular season, although it was anything but regular, has finally concluded, and for the most part there were a lot of surprises. For example, I think we were all hoping that the Pelicans would make it in at least to the play-in tournament, and it kind of seemed like to be a running joke amongst us NBA fans that the NBA was doing anything they possibly could to get the Pelicans into the play-in tournament, but alas, that's not what happened. Throughout the entire season, there were some pretty nice surprises and some players that clearly took the next step in their development, and in today's video, we're going to be trying to do our best to highlight each and every one of those players. Now, I am only human, and it's probable that I am going to miss a couple of players over here, so if there are any other notable breakouts that I missed at the end of this video, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below who I forgot, and maybe we could even do a part 2 to this video. Now guys, before we get to the content, I actually posted this video first onto my TikTok page, and it was literally content that you were able to consume within a minute. Obviously, this is a little bit more in-depth, and we were able to include more players in it as a result, but I am on the grind to 100,000 followers onto TikTok, so if you're a dude that TikToks, check me out in the description down below. On top of that, I'm giving away multiple copies of NBA 2K21 on Instagram and Twitter. You can find links to those in my description as well. And I live stream on Twitch on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 9 p.m. Pacific time. A link to all of that and other social media platforms are in the description down below. Now that we got all of that out of the way, cue the music. Mic check 1 2 1 2. We gotta start this out with a very underrated player, and that's Kelan Johnson, who was one of the many young players of the San Antonio Spurs that left a strong impression in the bubble. But honestly, nobody expected Kelan Johnson to come out and do what he did in the bubble, because this was a G League player prior to the bubble starting, but he has been a consistent player in the Spurs rotation, and he was a fairly good contributor during the bubble. Now look, he's definitely in the bottom tier in terms of players that broke out, but he did have his career high in the bubble, and the reason for this is he had a much better improved perimeter jump shot, and he didn't really have that many attempts, but for the most part he was very efficient, he brought good energy on the defensive end, and he showed an improved scoring ability. He demonstrated a much better ability to shoot off of catch-and-shoot jump shots, and he definitely could be a good role player for the San Antonio Spurs moving forward. Now, of course, Kelan Johnson's not the only San Antonio Spurs player to have broken out, because on this list we also feature his teammate, Derrick White. Now, to give you an idea, and of course these numbers are going to be skewed because there weren't that many bubble games, so please take that into consideration, but when he was given 24 minutes per game in the regular season, Derrick White averaged 10.4 points per game, 46% from the field, and 36% shooting from three. Now, this time around when he was in the bubble, he was given 29.8 minutes per game, averaged 19 points per game, 45% from the field still, and 39.3% from three. Now, obviously, there are much less games and it's much less of a sample size, but nonetheless, Derrick White has done a wonderful job and made the most of his opportunity in the bubble to showcase that he took the next step for the San Antonio Spurs. The next player on this list is probably one of the most underrated reasons why the Phoenix Suns went 8-0 in the bubble, and that is Mikal Bridges. Now, I understand Mikal Bridges didn't really come out and score very well, and he didn't do that much on the offensive end, but originally Bridges was drafted because of his defensive potential and his ability to do a little bit of everything. And while the Phoenix Suns did give him very meaningful minutes in the regular season, during the bubble, we really saw him take the next step because Bridges matched up against players like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Luka Doncic, and even a red-hot TJ Warren, who was the Michael Jordan of the bubble. And every single one of them were slowed down whenever they matched up with Mikal Bridges. This is very encouraging if you're a Phoenix Suns fan, because now you have two phenomenal forwards to play with. You have Mikal Bridges and you have Kelly Oubre. And honestly, it's kind of difficult to figure out who should be the starter at this point. So let me know in the comment section down below who you would pick. And while we're on the discussion about the Phoenix Suns, I don't know if Devin Booker is necessarily a breakout candidate because, on one hand, we already recognize him as a phenomenal player in the NBA. On the other hand, if you look at his stats before the bubble and during the bubble, he definitely took the next step. Because before the bubble, in 36 minutes per game, Devin Booker would average 26 points per game and 49% from the field. In the bubble, he averaged 30.5 points per game off of 33.8 minutes per game and shot 50% from the field. Now, I understand those are very marginal values, but Devin also showed an enhanced ability to perform in very high pressure situations, and I felt like if I didn't include him in this list, it would kind of be incomplete because the Phoenix Suns clearly took a huge step in their development, and I had to at least include Devin Booker in this list. Whether he's a breakout candidate or not, I had to give him his recognition. Now, of course, I would not be able to complete this list if I didn't mention a few key members of the Miami Heat. And I understand the Miami Heat seem to have compiled this phenomenal roster of, with all due respect, seemingly nobody players. Like, you're talking about Kendrick Nunn, who was drafted very, very late. You're talking about Duncan Robinson, who was undrafted. And of course, we're talking about Duncan Robinson here mainly because he has emerged into one of the most dangerous three-point shooters in the entire NBA, and he's had 3 straight 20-point games, and he's without a doubt one of the most important players on the Miami Heat at this point. And I don't know if now Erik Spoelstra is in this position where he needs to play Duncan Robinson significantly more minutes, but when you have an undrafted player performing at the rate that Duncan Robinson is, giving you the value that Duncan Robinson provides, and is able to draw so much perimeter attention as a result of his skill set, then without a doubt you have to play him significantly more minutes. I'm really curious to see how the Miami Heat perform in this playoffs and how deep they go, because I feel like with adequate roster management and great rotations, which I feel like Erik Spoelstra is 100% capable of, then the Miami Heat can make a much deeper run than most people are expecting them to. But without a doubt, in my opinion, out of all players that have improved, I think Duncan Robinson, who has been consistent in the regular season and has been able to carry it on in the bubble, has been one of the most impressive improvements in the bubble. Which brings us to our next player, and we all enjoyed watching what went down in Portland, am I right? Like, watching Damian Lillard shooting jumpers from the logo, jawing at Paul George, getting his sister involved, and if you guys missed that, I'll leave a link to it. It was my previous video. Without a doubt, it's definitely been one of the more fun things to watch. The Portland Trailblazers have been one heck of a story, and in the very beginning of the bubble, nobody expected them to even get close to a playoff spot, but here we are. They made it. And now we have a phenomenal first-round showdown with the Los Angeles Lakers, and a lot of that has to do with the emergence of Trent Jr., and a lot of people aren't giving him the credit he deserves because, of course, the entire story is going to be around Damian Lillard, Jusuf Nurkic, and Carmelo Anthony. But I feel like Trent Jr. is the reason why they're here, because now the Portland Trailblazers finally have a reliable bench wing player who they haven't had since Trevor Ariza was on their roster, mind you. But take a look at what Gary Trent has been able to do on the offensive side of the ball. He's made 29 of 51 threes in the bubble and has averaged 21 points in his first 5 games before, laying an egg this past Sunday. But of course, we're all realistic people. This might not be the most sustainable rate of production, but we have to acknowledge Gary Trent's development and his statistics inside of the bubble. Now, before the bubble, Trent Jr. was averaging 20 minutes per game, and in those 20 minutes, he was averaging 7.7 points per game off of 42.6% from the field and 38.8% from 3. Now, of course, Terry Stotts gave him additional minutes in the bubble, and he rewarded them. Now that his minutes were ticked up from 20 minutes per game to 34.1 minutes per game, Gary Trent responded by putting up almost 10 more points per game, 16.9 points per game, off of 51.6% from the field and 50.7% from 3. Now, of course, again, the bubble is a significantly smaller sample size, but still, he caught red hot fire at the right time, and as a result, really made a huge contribution in the Portland Trailblazers getting to where they are. And if he's able to sustain this level of production, well, the Portland Trailblazers have officially found the two-way complement that they have been yearning for to put alongside Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. You put Carmelo Anthony in that lineup and Yusuf Nurkic, and you have one scary starting five moving forward. Now, the next player on this list is a player that mainly was a beneficiary of injuries around him, and his head coach finally letting him start playing games, and that is, without a doubt, Michael Porter Jr. Now, just to give you an idea of how incredible Michael Porter Jr. has been, before the bubble, he was given 14 minutes per game. In those 14 minutes per game, he averaged 7.5 points per game, 49.5% from the field, and 42.2% from three. Now, in the bubble, he was given 33 minutes, which is a huge bump up, but it has now nearly tripled his points per game average with 22 points per game off of 55% shooting and 42.2% from three still. That's not to mention that Michael Porter Jr. was able to put up 37, 30, and 27-point performances and had 4 double-doubles throughout 5 games and is a major member of the Nuggets rotation moving into the playoffs. Now, when Michael Porter Jr. got drafted by the Nuggets, we were all aware that this could potentially happen. We're talking about a player that was originally considered to be a top 3 pick in the 2018 NBA draft, which is loaded, by the way, but didn't go top 3 mainly due to injury concerns. But it appears as though Michael Porter Jr. is delivering on the promise of being one of the silkiest and smoothest scorers in the entire NBA if he is able to stay in healthy. Now, his fit in Denver is also remarkable because he's complemented by a phenomenal playmaker in Nikola Jokic and has a great supporting cast around him. He's shown tremendous ability as not only a player that excels in catch and shoot situations, but is able to create his own shot off of the dribble and is a phenomenal off-ball cutter as well. The most terrifying part about Michael Porter Jr.'s game is the fact that he literally could shoot over defenders off of the dribble and is able to make very difficult contested looks. I think if he's able to stay healthy throughout his career, we're looking at one of the best scorers in the NBA throughout his career, but the fact that he stays healthy is a pretty big if in of itself. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think of Michael Porter Jr.? Do you think his rate of production is sustainable? Because I personally think that he makes it look so easy out there that he is going to be able to continue to do this for a very long time. Now, of course, would this list be complete without the bubble Michael Jordan himself, TJ Warren? And look at these statistics, man, because if you look closely, they just pop out at you and they're like unhuman, literally unhuman, because before the bubble, TJ Warren, as a role player for the Indiana Pacers, who was considered to be a player that could come in at any point and give you some scoring off of the bench or in the starting role, he was able to put up 18.7 points per game in 32.5 minutes per game and shot 53% from the field and 38% from three. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that he doesn't have a crowd around him. Maybe it's the fact that Victor Oladipo took a lesser role or originally wasn't supposed to come in, so he did train a little bit harder. I don't know if he suddenly views the Indiana Pacers as his team, because there are rumors that Victor Oladipo is definitely going to leave the Indiana Pacers for the Miami Heat this summer. But in the bubble, TJ Warren was able to put up 31 points per game in 36.4 minutes per game off of 58% shooting and 52% from three. Now, I always knew that TJ Warren could ball. Back when I was doing daily fantasy, I would pick him often and he would surprise me, but I never thought he would take this next step. Now, I do believe that this is sustainable production from him, although he did get shut down in his final game against the Miami Heat prior to the playoffs. I feel like a huge reason for that was because he was dealing with a nagging injury. So let me know in the comment section if you think this is sustainable for TJ Warren. Do you think he could potentially be an all-star down the road? Because he is going into a contract year where he's going to enter restricted free agency. And let me know, if you're the Pacers, do you sign TJ Warren to a maximum contract after what he's shown you in the bubble? Do you extend him? Or do you think it's a fluke and he's going to come back down to earth next year or possibly even in the playoffs? Now, that's going to be it for this list, guys. If you enjoy the content, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm and let me know if I left anybody out of this list. Aside from that, make sure you subscribe and turn on my notifications in the event that YouTube doesn't tell you that I uploaded a new video. And I'm your boy, TheFlightMike, and I'm dropping the mic until our next upload.